Okay, perfect. Hello and welcome everybody to this very special Marketo user group. My name is Danny and I'll be hosting today. It's very special because we've got our Sydney, our Brisbane and Melbourne mugs all joining together for one big mega mug. And we've also got a great lineup of speakers coming up, but more on them later. First, I'd like to just change the screen. I'd like to thank our sponsors, first of all, to Adobe for sponsoring the Sydney and Melbourne mugs and for Grant Thornton for sponsoring Brisbane. Honestly, without sponsors, these user groups can't really go ahead. So thank you so much again for sponsoring our mug today. All right, a little bit of some house rules before we get along with things. So we want to ensure that our mugs stay user-focused and a safe space for members for us to learn, network, and problem solve. So just a few things: no self-promotion or pitching of any kind. And if everyone could mute themselves as well, that would be awesome too. Don't contact people outside the user group without their consent. And if mug members share any of their use cases during this mug, please don't share that without their consent. And for any questions, just type in the chat at any time during the presentations for a chance to win a $25 gift card. Yes, my friends, we have some moolah today. So we're going to have some presentations, you can type your questions into the chat during that time. There'll be a Q&A section after each presentation, and we'll address your question then. And you might get a chance to win a $25 gift card. As you saw in the beginning, this mug meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on the mug YouTube channel to promote training, education, and future learning. If you don't wish to participate in this live recorded session, you can just watch the recorded version.
It held for a little bit, but...
Sorry, what was that? We are in a meeting this time around, so could just let everybody mute yourselves. That would be awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if you have any questions, please email it to advocacy@adobe.com. So stay connected with our chapter. For you guys who have come here, you probably already signed up with Bevy, but just so you know, we do have a different chapter for each city. We've got one for Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, and the APAC virtual mug. Even if you're not living in any of these cities, you can join any of them and you can get some notifications on when we're having in-person events and other cool things that are happening. So this will be sent out to everybody after the meeting concludes. You can go ahead and explore this page when you're ready. Do you need to update your Marketo certification? Or maybe you don't have one yet. There are 3 certifications that are available based on your level of experience. And like I said, this PowerPoint will be shared after the meeting concludes, so you can visit this link down here for more information and then some exam guides. But if you have any questions about what these certifications are about, you can reach out to any of your user group leaders. And who are your user group leaders? In Sydney, we've got Steph, we've got me, we've got Pierre, and we've got Holly. In Brisbane, we've got Brittany, Jasmine, and Paul. And in Melbourne, we've got Jay and Helen. We've got viewing parties happening in each place. So we've got a few folks here in Sydney. There's one in Brisbane, one in Melbourne. So everybody put your hands up and say, yeah, awesome. Honestly, without the Marketo user group leaders, we wouldn't have these, of course. So thank you so much for everyone's dedication. Now on to the agenda. I've already gone through the introductions and housekeeping, but we've got some speakers coming up on the way. So we've got V talking about native custom object integrations in Marketo. Vivek will be talking about custom integrations in Marketo. We've got a lot of integrations happening today. And we've got Sanford talking about Flow Boost. Thank you all for joining today. Like I said in the beginning, after each presentation, there will be a little section for Q&A. So pop your questions in the chat and we'll get onto it at that point. And without further ado, I'm going to let V take it away. So V, I'm going to stop sharing and you can go ahead and share from your side.
I'm hoping everyone is now seeing my screen.
I can see it.
Cool. Now I have to figure out where I'm at. Sorry. Oh, nope, there's something going wrong. Sorry. It's always going to be me who screws it up.
All good, B. It's slide.
Right. So this morning I have I decided to present on one of my favorite topics, which is the native integration. And for some reason, I got a lot of questions in sort of a 1 to 2 week period about custom objects and how they work and how to work properly with them. Now, the main thing to remember here is that there are very specific and key differences between native custom objects and Marketo custom objects. And we're going to sort of talk through that a little bit. I'm going to give you some use cases that I have come across and solved or not solved, as the case may be, using native custom objects. And then we're going to talk a little bit about updating, adding new fields and things like that. So as Danny said, we're going to have some questions at the end. So what on earth is a native custom object? So when I talk about a native custom object, I'm talking about custom objects that are synced through the native connector between Marketo and Salesforce and Dynamics. So your Dynamics could be on-premise, online, D365, whichever variant, but any custom object that's synced in any other way other than through the native connector between Marketo and Salesforce or Marketo and Dynamics is not what I'm talking about here. Like, I'm only talking about these two. So objects you build yourself in Marketo have custom integrations, whether or not that sync is coming from either of those two CRMs, they're Marketo custom objects. So some orgs have a native sync, and some have built what I call a hybrid sync, which is custom objects and custom integrations working together. But just to put it out there, this is a session about integrations. And when you get to sort of Sanford and Vivek stuff, you'll realize that limitations that I'm calling out here could be solved with integrations. But I'm not going to say, but if you did integrate it like with Marketo custom object, you get around that every 5 seconds. When I say it can't be done in this particular presentation, I mean it can't be done using the out-of-the-box native sync without building some kind of custom integration. So just to forestall all of the people going, wait, but we did it with a custom integration, because yes, of course you can. So let's talk about the similarities between what I'm calling native custom object sync and Marketo custom object sync. So the key similarities between the two, they both allow you to do 2 levels deep of syncing. So from a native custom object perspective, you're able to sync 2 levels down from lead, contact, or account. The Marketo custom object will allow you to build one-to-many and many-to-many relationships from person or account, which is essentially the same thing. It's going 2 levels down. Both can be used in email scripting 1 layer down. So just that one-to-many relationship. So if you're talking email scripting, velocity scripting, whatever it is that you like to call it, that can only be done in 1 layer down. So you can do 2 levels down for filtering and getting your smart list components together, but you can only use 1 for email scripting. You can add or remove fields from the native custom object sync at any time. That's pretty similar to the Marketo one, except for Marketo custom objects, you can add new or remove fields pretty much at any time. You have a limit of 50, and you cannot change the link or the dedupe fields once you've approved the object. So there's a few limits there, but it's kind of similar. You can sort of add or remove fields when you need to. You can delete native custom objects in Marketo at any time, and it removes all of the records. So it's kind of a lot more flexible than the the person object. So you can delete a custom object, you can delete the sync from Marketo at any time, and you can delete Marketo custom objects from Marketo at any time. Now, here's one of those lines where I'm like, Marketo can't write to a custom object. Yes, of course it can if you've got something cool like Flow Boost, and Sanford is going to talk about it a little bit. But natively, Marketo cannot write to its own custom objects. I don't care how many fancy tricks you bring into play. In the native sync, Marketo cannot write to Salesforce custom objects. The sync just will not allow it. You can only read from native custom objects. You can never write to them. And you can use them in smart lists, triggers, and filters. So the and one very, very specific difference I'm going to point out in a second. But so I get all the time sort of what do these things have in common? This is what the two custom objects have in common. Now here's where we diverge. These are the key differences. Okay. So with a native custom object, it only works between Salesforce and Dynamics through the native sync. You can't use the native sync with any other platform. Everything else is working through Marketo custom objects and a custom sync. The native custom object sync does not use your API limits. I answer this one on a weekly basis, actually. People are like, oh, I've only got 50K API calls in my Marketo instance, part of my license. The Salesforce or Dynamics CRM sync does not use those calls. It's separate from it. Of course, if you are using a custom sync, that does use your API limit. There is no technical limit on the number of objects you can sync or the number of fields you can sync per object other than Salesforce limits. So Salesforce and Dynamics have limits on how many fields or attributes you can add to an object or entity. And whatever you can add in CRM, you can bring down to Marketo, whereas Marketo custom objects have limit of 10 custom objects of 50 fields per object unless you beg support for an extension. So no limit to the number of custom object records synced. So there are license limitations when you are using Marketo custom objects as to how many records you can store across all custom objects and per custom object. The native sync doesn't have that limitation. This is the big one. This is the big one that annoys people a lot. When you're syncing to a Marketo custom object, you go into your activity log, you can actually see the custom object records against the person. The native custom object sync, you can't. You can't actually see the custom object against the person record unless other than in the actual sort of activity log where they're added to the custom object. You can click into that and see what was added, but you can't actually just go in and see these are all the records that a person has for the custom object sync, the native custom object sync. You can't trigger actions in Marketo based on field values changing in a native custom object. You can do that for a Marketo custom object. So if a random field changes on that object, you are waiting for the standard sync cycle to come back around, and you have to do a little bit of trickery in Marketo to make things happen fast based on values changing in Marketo in native synced custom objects. So if you're learning for the first time that you can do this for Marketo custom objects, it isn't there out of the box. You have to ask Adobe to switch it on for you, but you can do it. You can't do it for the native custom object sync. And the native custom object is always associated with a person record in Marketo. It could be a lead or contact in CRM and uses the CRM IDs to dedupe. Whereas Marketo custom objects, you can use pretty much any person value as the link or dedupe key, but it has to be associated with the person or account. So basically, if you've got the lead or contact in CRM, you can get the person objects associated with it. You don't have to set up any additional sort of dedupe or linking keys, and it's not email address based and all that kind of stuff. So all the stuff that goes with the native custom sync, with the native sync, applies to custom objects where sort of linking and deduping those records is concerned. So this is sort of a rundown on, because I very often get asked, what are the differences between the two? So these are sort of the key kind of differences that are between the native custom object and the Marketo custom object. And when you look in the admin section, they are actually built in completely different sections. So when you are syncing native custom objects, I've got a few must-haves and gotchas here that that you need to keep in mind. You've got to have admin permission in Marketo to go in and sync your native custom objects. It's a secondary process that's done after the standard sync is in place. So if you're new to Marketo and you're putting Marketo in for the first time, or you're a consultant who's doing this, standard sync must be in place first. It really does. And I've seen people try to do this the other way around, and it just doesn't work. The Marketo sync user must have a read permission for the custom object in CRM to be able to see it. So that's something on the Salesforce and Dynamics side, the permission to actually see the object. And you can drill down and give Marketo access to some fields and not other fields within the custom object in CRM. So you can be quite picky about what you want Marketo to see from a permission standpoint. Refresh the sync schema every time before attempting to sync a new custom object, because that brings down all the latest changes from the CRM. But you've got to switch off your Salesforce or Dynamics sync to do this. The number one thing that I see people do is switch off the sync the custom object, and then forget to switch the sync back on. There is nothing in Marketo that's going to remind you that you have your sync disabled. And the Adobe documentation is misleading at best, and sometimes downright confusing on this particular point. So so you can at pretty much any time stop your sync, refresh your sync schema, and you should do this every time before attempting to sync a new custom object, not just once or at some point in the past. Do it before you try to sync, because you want the latest changes coming through. And when you actually sync the schema, you can see in Marketo a list of everything Marketo can see. If your object is not there, you have a permissions problem straight out of the gate, or you have a problem with where the object is sitting within CRM. So so it's really a case of trying to figure out exactly where your object is, and that's what I'm going to sort of kind of walk through now, because the thing about this particular sync is that you could look at a diagram of your CRM, of an object schema. You could look at it and know, just from looking at it, knowing the rules of how this native custom sync works, you could just look at it and see exactly what's going to happen. So you go, okay, cool. I'm going to walk you through a couple of use cases where you can see the thought process behind it. So in this particular case, you could have your contact. So let's pretend we're in CRM right now. You've got your contact, you've got a secondary object called product subscription, which then leads to product, and it's a one-to-many kind of relationship. This is not a problem. Marketo can see from the contact and 2 levels down. So it could see what's on the product subscription, and it could see what's on the product. If you were doing email scripting or velocity scripting at this point, you could only get the information from product subscription. You could not get it in this particular example from product. So this is another one I have seen a lot. So contact, event member, event. So I'm just using sort of random object kind of examples that I've seen throughout my career. But so contact, event member, event, and event location. So in this particular scenario, you could get your contact, you could get event member, you could get event in Marketo, but event location is one step too far. You can't see it. So if for some reason you wanted that event location and information, you would need to push that information up to the events object in order to be able to see it. So you could do it as a roll up, you could do it, don't use formula fields because Marketo has a special relationship with formula fields, but you can, if you can stamp that information that you need from the event location up to the event in this circumstance, you could get to that information. Here's another one that I see a lot. you've got something like product subscription in CRM, and contact is already associated with it, but you also have an association from lead through to product subscription. You cannot have both the lead and the contact coming, so as sync from Marketo from the lead and the contact through to the same object, not directly like this is showing here. So so in this case, you would struggle to have the lead associated, or the lead object. You would be struggling to find leads who are associated with that particular product subscription, because you can only have sort of a one-to-one relationship there. There is a workaround for this inside Marketo where you have both, and what you can do is you can rename them. You can either build them as separate objects in CRM. So in this case, we've got product subscription. In this case, we've got product subscription lead and product subscription. So you can either go straight there, or you can have lead and contact syncing with product subscription in this example. But you would need to rename that object in Marketo to make it different. So you can actually just double click on the name inside the custom object sync and rename it in Marketo, but it essentially, for all intents and purposes, turns it into a separate object. So you would have to, in Marketo, always be going, okay, find me all the contacts associated with product subscription and all the leads associated with product subscription lead. So it's very important that you recognize that leads and contacts are different objects in Salesforce and Dynamics, and you might need to make small changes like that either in CRM or in Marketo. Here's another interesting one, and this happens with a lot. This happens a lot these days, especially with some of Salesforce's clouds, like nonprofit cloud and financial services cloud and higher ed cloud. You get people who want to build account relationships, or contact has a relationship with multiple accounts. In this case, Marketo can see the primary relationship to the account, but you could build a custom object sync to the relationship object to multiple accounts, but you can't see those multiple accounts. So this is something that is very difficult to find a workaround for. Marketo has a one-to-one relationship with account, so between contact and account, and it's very flat structure. So getting to that multi-account structure is very difficult. You also can't get past opportunity. So if you go contact role opportunity, there's a standard object on the other side of opportunity called opportunity product. There's no way to get to that, because you can't sync through. These rules are quite finite. You can't sync through to through the opportunity that way. You're already 2 levels deep at that point, but you can't go out through the opportunity that way. So if you need to get to the cases object, absolutely easy. Most people think of that as a standard object in Salesforce. It is not in Marketo world. It's a custom object, but you can do a custom object sync straight from contact to case or through product. So that one's a really easy use case to solve, and I've done it many times. So what I was saying was, if you are looking at something like this, so if you were looking at a Salesforce schema that looked like this, you can automatically, knowing those relationships and knowing how far Marketo can go and know the pathways that it can get to, you can automatically just sort of in your mind just kind of go, what can Marketo see? In this case, it can see things like campaign member, lead, out to opportunity. It could see product, subscription, relationship, cases, opportunity, contact role here. But those 2 in red, they're just too far. They're too far down the hierarchy. They're too far deep. They come through a relationship object. So once you start to learn the rules, you can just look at a schema like this and go, nope, I can't see that. I can't see that. But if you're not quite sure, just sync the schema, run it, and have a look at what Marketo can see. So native custom objects, you've got it synced, but you need to add some fields. So so add the field on Salesforce object, ensure Marketo has read permissions on the field. So this is a new field that you want to sync on a Salesforce object after you've already synced it to Marketo. Give Marketo time to sync. go to your admin Salesforce Custom Objects as if you're syncing a new object, refresh the data schema. So that requires switching off the sync. So remember to switch it back on again. You go to your edit visible fields list, find your new field and tick whether you want triggers and filters for the new field, save it and switch the sync back on. So you can actually get to that. Regardless of what Marketo's documentation currently says, you can add new fields to a synced object that's in use. You can. It was brought in a few years back, actually quite a few years back, but for some reason the documentation says the wrong thing. You can't remove the sync from a field that's in use somewhere. That's a general rule in Marketo. You can't remove things that are in use. You can unsync entire custom objects and remove all the data, but not if it's in use. And a big gotcha here. If you already have data in that field, think about when you are using the Marketo native sync generally, and you're giving it access to data that a field that already existed had data in it. Marketo will only see things that have changed in each of its sync rounds. So if you're giving Marketo access to an existing field with data in it, Marketo won't see the data in that custom field. It will see the field, but it won't see the underlying data until you update the underlying lookup record, not the custom object itself. So if contact is associated to product and you're giving Marketo visibility into a product field, then you need to update that contact to get that custom object record to sync down. That's very important. People are always falling into that one. Awesome, that's me done. So I haven't seen the chat, but
yeah, thank you so much, V. We're gonna check with the viewing parties first to see if there are any questions. Do we have anything coming from Brisbane? Give a couple of awkward silence for that.
I love how Vivek answered the question just before I answered it. Awesome.
We've got a question in Melbourne.
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Go for it.
Katie from EWS Super. We use mostly Marketo Custom Objects, but looking at what you're saying, I can see some areas where it might be simpler to just put a native object in. And we're using Dynamics.
Cool.
Do you think, is it bad practice to have both running at the same time, or would we be better off sticking to one or the other?
It's not bad practice to have a hybrid sync running. It's very bad practice to sync to the same object. It's same entity. So don't have that Dynamics entity coming down through the Dynamics native sync and through the custom sync. I mean, they don't really interfere with each other. It's just going to be very, very confusing inside Marketo.
Well, that's why I'm thinking if you were going to add, I mean, it's not difficult for us to add something else from the REST API, and there's a data engineer who knows his sheets, so we're fine. But it is just, yeah, just that question, because this is new jargon for me.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of note, like if somebody built that to start with, they must have had a reason for doing it. So
we've got a one-to-many relationship between our accounts and our customers, and that
could be a reason. So if you run into those kinds of complexities, and the heading straight into the Marketo custom object is usually ideal, especially if you've got a team that's willing to do the integration and maintain it for you.
Great, thank you.
I also have one question.
Oh, another one. Yeah.
Hi Veronica, nice to meet you again, and definitely missing your presence in the room. But I just have a question that if I use custom object to pull the data from the survey form, like if I put a custom object in the form and try to pull the data, so that like I think somebody had told us that custom object won't create a field on the person account, but now I'm seeing from a presentation that in Marketo custom, when you use custom object, it is on the person level. So we were just thinking to use that field object on the field on the form and then pull the data directly from the survey form to populate the fields on the person record. But I'm not sure how to put it together and logically do it in Marketo instance.
If you've put stuff into a custom object inside, you can't copy that. There's no mechanism within Marketo to get that onto the person object. There just isn't. Like you push that, if you pushed survey data through Salesforce or Dynamics and through a native custom object and then down into Marketo. You could use it. You could use it in the email. You could use it in smart list, stuff like that. But you can't copy that information from the custom object onto the person. That's actually not possible.
But you can, sorry, it's Kate again, you can with the Marketo custom object, can't you?
No.
You can. That's what I was also told that we
No.
can.
You can't pick something up from the Marketo custom object. So
Yeah, we just created.
Sanford's sitting in the back here going, hey, I could do that with Flowboost. Yeah, you can. And you can do it with the REST API and all that sort of stuff. You can't.
I'm actually saying V is right. Can't do it.
Can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, of course you can do it with Flowboost, but yeah, absolutely. It's a misunderstanding. And I think that
it's a common misunderstanding. Yeah, that you can copy because you just can't.
Right. Custom activities you can extract a bit, but
little
custom
bit,
objects don't have that. Yeah.
I think where B is getting at is you have to use a third party. You can't do it out of the UI.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah. Right.
That's as I said at the beginning. Everything I'm saying is, yeah, okay. If you build some kind of REST API that pulls it out and in and blah blah blah, yeah, okay, you can solve pretty much anything. But out of the box with the UI, no, you can't.
And when we use dedupe fields on custom object, can we use existing dedupe field like by blanking it out using null in a flow step, or we have to create a unique dedupe fields while linking the custom object on the lead and the account level?
I think you're talking more Marketo custom objects there rather than the native sync custom objects. The native sync custom object, you don't have to think about dedupe fields or linking or anything. It's the lookup field through the person to the object that syncs it all down. It's not about choosing link fields or dedupe fields or anything like that. So Marketo custom objects, you can use pretty much any link or dedupe field that you want. Most people use like a unique identifier or the email address or something like that to associate with the person. But when you're dealing with native custom objects, you don't think about that at all. You sync it down and it's using the IDs under the covers to connect those dots for you.
Cool. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the questions. So we've got anything on the Sydney party? No. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming in online. If anyone thinks of anything moving forward, feel free to just still pop it in. We'll look at it later. But I think we will move on to our next speaker, to Vivek.
And Paul, thank you for picking up on that comment about formula fields, because Marketo does have a special relationship to formula fields.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Vivek. Please take it away.
Hey, good morning, Dan. Good morning, everyone. And V, first off, thank you for a beautiful presentation. It actually set up a very beautiful preface for my presentation. So thank you so much. So as we've all seen, Marketo talks to two main CRMs, which is Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce using the native integration. But that's not just what Marketo does. It can also talk to other systems as well. And this is something that everybody asks, which is, we've got a custom CRM or a custom database. We want to integrate it with Marketo. How can we do it? So this presentation basically I'd like to walk you through around what is a typical use case around why would you want to use a custom integration, and how can we basically integrate it across with Marketo. So at a very quick high-level overview, Marketo provides a comprehensive suite of SOAP APIs and REST APIs to integrate back with Marketo. And this is how we would actually start looking at bringing in any of your custom CRMs or your custom databases to talk to Marketo. SOAP APIs, they are something of the past. So if you are a 1980s or 1990s person, you'll realize that that's when SOAP APIs started becoming quite famous. And slowly now it is a point in time where it's become deprecated. Nobody uses SOAP. Everybody uses REST APIs or have moved on to using GraphQLs. But for Marketo, we start using REST APIs, and that's basically the preferred approach to integrate CRMs, databases, data warehouses, and any of the BI platforms. So why am I saying this, and why is this overview so important? Let's look at a very typical use case. we've got a very switched on marketer. He or she, they basically say, I'm getting data from the CRM. I know I've got all my leads and contacts coming through. I'm okay with that. But I'm not quite satisfied with the type of campaigns that I want to run. I want to go a step beyond. So they go to the BI team and they basically say, hey, I have this beautiful campaign idea that I have in mind. I want to start targeting the most high value customers who I want to know which campaign I can send them, what time I want to send them. I want to start doing a lot of data science and AI modeling. I want to do some propensity modeling. I want to do all this amazing AI and ML stuff. But I want you to do that, and I want you to send me the data so I can use that in Marketo to start executing campaigns. The BI guy says, okay, I'll write up some queries. I'll build up a nice data science model. I'll validate it using your training data sets. I'll do all of that, and then I'll basically give you this data. So the BI guy or the data science guy has basically built it out. He's having it ready on his end. Marketo's over here, and now the big question comes: how can I bring these two data together? And typically, there's one of three ways that we can basically do this. So either you can ask Adobe to build it for you, and Adobe can manage it, or you can ask a third person or a third party to basically who've already built connectors and have a platform, and you can use that platform to do an end-to-end kind of a connection. Or the third one is you can look at building your own custom integration as well. Broadly speaking, this is where one of the three, in your own integration pattern will sit in one of these three buckets. There's no other bucket available. So with this overview, I'd like to go through and talk through what each one of these integrations actually look like. So let's start with what Adobe has built and how you can start look at leveraging this. So at Adobe, we have basically built out something called as Adobe's Data Transfer Hub. The idea behind this particular solution is it allows customers to provide a CSV file in an SFTP location. And the Data Transfer Hub takes the responsibility of actually transforming this data and pushing it back across into Marketo. Once the data has been pushed to Marketo, it then provides back with something called as a response file, which is typically like an integration log. So for a particular record, it says if the record was created, updated, or skipped. And if a record was skipped, why was a record skipped? So it will contain the error message in that. From a customer's point of view, the work that is needed on their end, it's basically the process of generating the CSV file from their custom data warehouse or their CRMs and dropping it across into the SFTP. And then similarly, when a response file is generated, consuming that and then writing it back across to the integration log. So from a customer's point of view, they don't really have to worry about how the APIs work, what happens in there. None of that heavy lifting needs to be done by the customer. What data can we bring through across the Marketo using the Data Transfer Hub? Pretty much everything. So if you're looking at your leads, contacts, your opportunities, your custom objects, your custom activities, all of the data can basically come through across into Marketo using the Data Transfer Hub. Similarly, when we look at data getting exported out of Marketo, right now it is on persons as well as your activity data coming out. But soon in the future, we will look at expanding this out to include program membership and any other export data that might be needed out from Marketo. But this is typically the biggest use case that we've seen when it comes to data out of Marketo is mainly around activity information and person record information coming out of Marketo. The entire Data Transfer Hub solution is completely managed by Adobe. So we run it, we manage it, and we support it. You do not need to install or host anything on your infrastructure or on your environment. All of the entire solution, the entire code base, even the SFTP itself is managed by Adobe. And we use our own AWS account, which is based out of Sydney, to basically run this entire architecture or this entire infrastructure for our customers. Globally, we've got about close to 200 odd customers using this solution today. So it's a widely used solution by all customers. So right from our small customers to our big enterprise customers, everybody uses this particular solution in terms of bringing data across into Marketo. Now, again, depending upon use cases, this can the options that I'm saying, you can use it as your entire integration pattern to integrate between Marketo and your CRMs or your data warehouses. Or it can be a part of the hybrid approach where you've got data coming in through the native integration between Marketo and your CRM, and you've got this hybrid approach coming in across to bring in any additional data from any of your other data sources across into Marketo. So this at a high level is our first option. The second option pretty much removes the entire Adobe Data Transfer Hub solution out of the window and basically brings in something called as third-party softwares or third-party middlewares, as we call it. So middlewares, they are typically they typically do the job of a postman. So postman, what he does or what they do is they'll pick up the letter from one place and deliver it to another. That is what a middleware will basically do. In this particular scenario, it's going to pick up data from your system, drop it across into Marketo, pick up data from Marketo, and then drop it back across into your system. It does a lot of other things. It'll do like a lot of extraction, transformation, and loading of data. So a lot of ETL jobs can be run. So you can do a lot of lookup things and those kind of stuff within the middleware platform. And depending upon how complex you want to do it, or how simplified you want to do it and those kind of things, you can basically build out your middleware platform or the flows within the middleware platform to be very robust and very complex as well. So when we look at middleware platforms, there's platforms out there like Delboomi, there's MuleSoft, there's Informatica, there's Kingswaysoft, and then there's Software AG. There's many other out there. I've just picked the ones that I have worked with in the past. And what happens with these platforms is that it's not just used for integrating between your CRMs and with Marketo. It can be used to integrate between any point-to-point systems. So, for example, you can integrate it with your CRM, with your data warehouse. It can be used as an event bus where data from various systems keep dropped across into this middleware or this event bus. It then basically sends data out to various parties depending upon how the data has been brought in to the system. So middlewares, they're very robust, they're very complex, and typically if you're using a middleware, you won't be just using it between like a CRM or data warehouse and Marketo. You will be using it quite robustly across various data sources and various data points with Marketo. Now, there are certain things when it comes to middlewares that are good and bad. So the connectivity with Marketo, you can do it in one of two ways. You can either use their REST or HTTP endpoint and then basically connect it with Marketo APIs and then basically push data through, or middlewares will also have their own out-of-the-box Marketo connectors, and you can basically leverage them to basically integrate back with Marketo. The out-of-the-box connectors, they are dependent upon each of these companies building it out. So when I first started working with connectors, I was using it with Informatica as my platform, and the Marketo connector was still being built out. This was back in 2016, and at that point in time, even though the connector was able to do certain things, it was quite rigid in terms of what I can configure, what I cannot configure, what it can do in terms of data errors or in data handling, those kind of things. So it becomes a little bit more complicated when it comes to using those connectors, especially when they were still being built out. Now, yes, those connectors are quite robust. So yes, so you can look at leveraging them, but these are just some things to keep in mind, that there might be some nuances with these connectors as well. So when you're building things out using a middleware, you need to be aware that if you can't use the connectors, you can definitely use the REST API connectors to talk to Marketo. But yes, this is the second pattern of integrating back with Marketo. Again, you I basically set up an integration for a customer of mine, where we were having the native connector to talk between Marketo and Salesforce, and we also had Informatica bringing in data from Salesforce across in Marketo, because we wanted to bring in some additional data and we wanted to do some additional transformations within the ETL layer. So it is possible to do that kind of a route as well. Now, the third one, I call it, I've written it down as custom scripts, but I typically call it as build your own system or build your own platform kind of a thing. You have complete flexibility. So you're not restricted by the data transfer hub solution. You're not restricted by the middleware platforms limitations. You have absolutely no limitation. You basically get a clean free chip to build out the integration in any way, shape, and form that you need. You can use any programming language whatsoever, and you basically have a complete range of integrating your CRM systems with Marketo. The only limitation comes over there is that you might have to use APIs, or you'll have to use APIs with Marketo end, and you may either have to use APIs on your CRM end, or you'll have to use like an ODBC or a JDBC connector to talk to the databases. So that's the only thing to be aware of. Typically, these kind of custom scripts, things to keep in mind is that when you build it out, you will have to think about who's going to manage it, who's going to maintain it, where are we going to host it, and those kind of things. But in terms of flexibility and building it out, as I said, you have you basically have complete leverage and complete freedom to do whatever or however you would like to build this out. Have I done an integration like this in the past? Yes, I have done an integration like this in the past as well. We've got a couple of big customers, and for them, we had to basically look at doing some additional script work because they needed some additional ETLs, and they didn't have a middleware. They didn't want to look at using the data transfer hub solution. So we had to write a custom script. I wrote a custom script. It sits on an EC2 instance, queries Marketo's APIs, downloads the data, transforms it, and then basically posts it, sends it across into an SFTP location that the customer has, and then they basically use that for downstream processing. That script has been running for close to 3 years now, and the customer has not complained about that, about the overall performance of that script. So yes, you can do this as well. This is the third option. So now you'll ask, okay, you've given me 3 options. Which option should I use when? I get asked this question a lot of times when I'm actually consulting with my customers, and my answer to them is it really depends upon these 4 things that I've listed on your screen. Who's gonna host it? What does and how skilled is your entire development team in terms of developing this? What about your management, which means your ongoing support? And what does your BAU support look like? So maintenance in terms of enhancements and those kind of things. And then BAU support is like who's going to be able to run and manage this entire solution going forward. So when you look at the Adobe's DTH solution, as I said, because it is Adobe who's giving you the solution, we run it, we host it, we manage it, we develop it, we enhance it, we do everything. So it is our responsibility to make sure that the DTH integration service is running with the highest availability as possible. If you run into integration errors, we look at troubleshooting it and helping you troubleshoot those errors and fixing those errors from a DTH point of view. When it comes to middleware, middlewares are typically, there's 2 ways of doing it. So you can either have it on-prem, which means you will be managing and running the infrastructure over there, or you'll be running it on their own cloud infrastructure. So it becomes a cloud platform or an infrastructure as a platform service that you'll basically leverage over there. The second part from a middleware is development. So it's not simple where you can just drag and drop and then you can basically run the entire middleware platform end to end. It's not as simple. You will need some development skills because when you're bringing in data from your CRM, it needs to come into Marketo. It needs to come into your middleware. You need to make sure that the data is transformed correctly so that Marketo can read and accept it correctly, and then basically push it across to Marketo. So there is some amount of development work that will be required even if you're using a middleware solution. The entire maintenance and the support from a solution, from a maintenance point of view, it's a customer's responsibility. So it becomes your responsibility to run and manage this entire stuff. We can help you in the overall development of this integration, but the actual management and the support becomes your responsibility. Adobe support can Adobe can only help out in terms of answering questions related to the REST APIs. So that's where Adobe's help will come into play. When it comes to custom scripts, now this again, you can either use an on-prem server or an on-prem instance to basically run this, or you can basically use a cloud infrastructure like an Azure instance or an EC2 instance. So again, there's this flexibility over there in terms of hosting. But the development is going to be quite heavy because you will now need to write everything right from scratch around how to bring in the data from your data warehouse, how to transform it, how to send it to Marketo, how to handle errors, how to get errors back from Marketo, how to basically read them, and then basically process them downstream. So all of that heavy lifting needs to be done by your developer. Again, just like the middleware platform, the entire solution is fully managed by the customer. So you manage it, you run it. From an Adobe point of view, we can help out in terms of answering questions with respect to REST APIs. So that's basically where Adobe support comes into play. And that pretty much sums up your entire integration lesson from both Veronica and me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vivek. Really appreciated that and loved it. I think there's some questions online. So could we get those questions? Let's have a look here. Does Pierre or Helen want to call it out? Let me see here.
Yeah.
Nice one, Nico.
Some of them we've been answering as we go, but yeah.
So the question is, can DTH import CSV file if needed?
So DTH is, as I said, it is a separate add-on solution. So which means once you purchase it, we'll set it up. So at that point in time, you will have the ability to import CSV files as needed. But that's depending upon the jobs that we set up. So like, for example, if we set up a job to import data across into the person object, you can only import data across into the person object. You can't look at using that to import data across into your custom object because we have to set up specific jobs for each one of them. It's not a replacement for using the import CSV option that is present in the Marketo UI. It's not that. So it's an integration. It's an integration option. It's not an import CSV replacement option.
Vivek, you probably answered this at the beginning and I just didn't understand the jargon. Why would we use this instead of our REST API?
So again, it comes down to the big question, right? So the DTH option it uses the REST APIs internally, but it removes the overall development overload from your team, and it basically moves it back to Adobe. So if I have to put it very simply, it's either Adobe builds things for you, or a third party builds it for you, or you build it yourself. So your integration is going to fit in one of these three options. DTH fits in the first option, which is where we've built it for you. Your responsibility is only to give us the file, and then we'll take care of importing the data across into Marketo. That's where DTH comes into play.
Hi, Vivek. Is there any bulk API as well for that, or is it just REST APIs?
So when it comes to DTH, we use the batch APIs to import data across into Marketo. And the reason why we do that is because the batch APIs gives us record level errors. So we basically understand for a particular record which record was created and which was updated. And it also gives us the Marketo IDs present in the response that we get back from Marketo, which is why we use the batch for importing data across Marketo. When it comes to exporting data out of Marketo, we use the bulk APIs to actually export out activity as well as person object data, and it works well. The other thing to keep in mind is batch APIs work really, really well when it comes in terms of importing big amounts of data. And when I say big amounts of data, I mean in terms of importing millions of rows of data, because we can have multiple concurrent threads processing to try and import the data as quick as possible. Bulk APIs are good, but again, you start limiting in terms of the file size. It is limited to 10 MB. And then if you've got a very wide CSV file that you need to import, a 10 MB file limit becomes quite it becomes quite difficult in terms of managing it, and it doesn't become very efficient. So we've gone through our development things, and we've gone through certain design cycles, and that's when we decided upon using the batch APIs, because the overall throughput is really, really fast.
There's a couple more online questions.
Yes.
We're starting to use custom APIs to trigger our campaigns. Apart from the API limit, are there any other limitations we should be aware of with this approach? Potentially looking at 50 different campaigns firing hundreds of times a day.
No, so you can use custom APIs to trigger campaigns. It is basically the request campaign API or the schedule campaign API has specifically been built out to do that. You can definitely use that. The only thing that I will basically say is, depending upon your use cases, you can actually try to see if you can actually batch those campaigns up. You can batch the request up to the request campaign so that it becomes a little bit more efficient in terms of your API usage. Otherwise, your API usage is going to grow up quite exponentially. That's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing that you can also look at is you can see if you can basically add them to a static list and then basically trigger it off from a static list, and those kind of things. So there are certain design options available, but it really depends upon your use case and how many API calls that you're using. If that's already efficient, then you don't have to do anything. You can keep running with the same option available.
Thank you. We've got one more from Brisbane. Can you discuss any API limits for the script/middleware approach?
Yes. So when it comes to API limits, all of the limits are basically what the end systems adhere to. So like, for example, when it comes to Marketo, we've got our batch API limit sitting at 300 for any of the person or any of the person or custom object records, and 200 for any of the asset objects. We've got concurrency limits in Marketo, which is making 100 API calls in a 20-second window or 10 API calls in a given 1-second window, those kind of things. So there are those kind of limits that you will have to adhere to, irrespective of whether you're using DTH, you're using middlewares, or using custom scripts. This is across the board. Similarly, you might have some limits on your CRM end as well, or your data warehouse end as well, that you need to adhere to. And again, these limits are not enforced by the middleware platform or your scripts. They are enforced by the end systems, which we cannot bypass. We have to adhere to all of them.
Thank you, Vivek. I think that was all the questions, looks like it. So we're going to now move on to Sanford. Sanford, if you could take us away with Flow Boost.
Yes, hello, taking away indeed. Thanks everyone. This is a great example of how the NYC mug doesn't get turnouts like this, and I'm gonna have to yell at us. I'm the co-leader, so that's yelling at myself. But I'm very impressed, and I've heard the same about the Japan user group too. So maybe we're just lazy over here. But thanks to everyone for inviting me, to Jay, who reached out originally. The funny thing is that Jay said that I should keep it light and kind of, high level, not too techy. And I realized that that's probably even better, because I think that Vivek and V both were kind of technical, and no one like blanked out and dropped off. So now I'm like, I'm not sure, maybe I should have been more technical. But I am going to try to be kind of breezy in my introduction to the Flow Boost platform, more than I might have been otherwise. One other thing is, it happens to be my birthday, and my time zone awareness was completely thrown off. So I forgot, oh wait, that's tonight, New York time. So I'm wasting time right now. I'm gonna try to get through what I can in 25 to 28 minutes, have a little time for Q&A, and then I have to drop out in about exactly 50 minutes. So should be good. Okay, oh, and also I'm probably going to mess up the PowerPoint sharing alternating with the live Marketo demo that I'm going to do, but it's inevitable, I have to do that. But so I had this idea that I was going to start presenter view of my PowerPoint deck, which I'm going to do right now, and then also have Marketo behind it. And when I Alt-Tab between the two, I'm going to mess up. So I apologize in advance. So let's see what I can do here. And I hope everyone can see at least the PowerPoint concept.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, great. And then behind it will be my,
also
maybe I
good.
should make that a little bit bigger. Okay, great. Thank you for that confirmation. That's just great. This is where I'll screw up though, Alt-tabbing and forgetting to do presenter view. Ah, okay, there we go. So this is me. You may know me from the Marketing Nation, where I'm a community moderator. Also recently elevated to the NYC Mug co-leader, though I've been doing the Q&A there a lot, which anybody, by the way, is welcome to if you want to. And my blog, pretty well traveled, is blog.technical.com. Some people don't know how that's pronounced, but it's just like technical, TEKNKL.com. Here's the slide where Jay had said, take a moment to talk about code or technical things and the power up and advantages of getting technical before taking it back to non-technical. So I think I'm just going to kind of skip over this one, though you'll see it when the recording comes out. This is really just kind of a pumping you up pep rally or and so on to say, it's okay, don't be scared of technical stuff. It's great for your career. I'm going to be as non-technical and high level as possible today, but the deeper dives are great for everyone. And sometimes, I guess my second bullet point there is that sometimes what people think of as technical is really an everyday task for MOPS people. And that's where I talk about URL encoding, HTML encoding. If you follow me on Marketing Nation, you've probably seen me a lot of times point out to someone, oh, you forgot to URL encode that, or you forgot to pass that through velocity because you need to remove the protocol, which means you have to know how a URL is structured, and things like that to me that are kind of more important than, in a certain way, than coding or anything like that. And I like to say that if I were hiring somebody, I would much sooner hire somebody who understands these general ideas like encoding and how HTML is structured and stuff like that, than someone who's like, if you've got 5 years of whatever, Python or some other experience, but you're not really good at the fundamentals, which happens a lot in the industry. It's just reality of people that came up through a program and now they're like enterprise developers, but they don't even know how our URL is structured. So anyway, so I like to say these are good things to dive into. By the way, I said I was skipping this slide, but I'm not. Mean this very much from from the bottom of my hiring or industry heart. Please learn encoding stuff. Don't worry about programming languages if you don't have to, but learn these fundamentals so we don't send out broken links. So our structure looks good, so we can say yes to our boss when they say is this structured correctly? Whose fault is this, right? We want to be able to point a finger and say, oh, Marketo's tracking server was down. And not go, oh, I screwed up. I included the wrong link. So Flow Boost. Hard not to violate in some way the idea of self-promotion because it is like our product. But so Flow Boost has been running since 2014.
Yeah, go nuts. We're all good.
Okay. No. Well, I mean, it's. I was like, oh no, how do I boost? But it was originally built for Atumos, the agency that Edward Onthank used to run, and we used it internally at some clients. It even was used, I think Paul's on the call maybe, by Adobe at a certain point. And by the way, also saying hello to the 7 or 8 people whose names I recognize. I wanted to say hello, and I know that you were Australian and all the other things like that. Yeah, so we kind of went public with it a frighteningly long time ago. I mean, 2015 is kind of crazy. And since then, it's become the back pocket tool of a lot of Marketo instances. And the vast majority of them, by the way, are just using the community edition of Flow Boost, which is the one that everyone has access to. And there's no, so it's not like a commercial situation. It's more like, please have this. I want every market, like if a Marketo instance doesn't have it, I'm actually disturbed. So what was the idea? It's not really trademarked. It's like the trademark logo, trademark emoji. I like to say it's like how you say no less often. The boss comes to you to say, they say, ask, can Marketo do this? And with a Flow Boost somewhere in the back of your mind, and with a kind of mild mastery of what it probably can do, like V was saying in the early part of the session, you could say, yeah, I think Marketo can do that. Now, sometimes we say Marketo in quotes because what we're really thinking, and Joe Pitts is on the call, knows this very well because he's worked with clients in exactly this way. They say, like, can Marketo do this thing, or do we have to do it in a Salesforce, Apex Trigger? Do we have to do it using a third-party integration or some third-party tool? And Joe can say with a wink, oh no, Marketo can do it. And what Joe actually means is FlowBoost can do it, because we think of FlowBoost and Marketo as this unified whole. Once you introduce the idea of FlowBoost to your flow steps, you start to think of Marketo as having these things that it's actually missing. So, I mean, the spark for building FlowBoost was my alarm in 2014. Well, I don't know if in Australia you use this expression EDC for everyday carry. In the US, it's become kind of polluted by gun nuts, but it used to mean the tool or the Swiss Army knife or the screwdriver and flashlight you have in your pocket. So I think of FlowBoost as like EDC for MOPS people. It doesn't mean you're going to use it every day. It's like that special tool that lets you break open a car window if the lock is jammed or something like that. But having it in your glove box or in your pocket is the way, again, you have, I think, a greater comfort recommending Marketo. In fact, like I've sort of sold Marketo, if you will. I'm not a partner, so not at that kind of sold, but I've defended Marketo for clients by saying to myself, at least, oh, well, we'll plug FlowBoost in. So we'll do, items 1, 8, and 11 with FlowBoost. And then I can say Marketo as a whole can do those things. And you can get a community API key. And, after this.
Do you mind speaking just a little bit louder? A few people say that they can't really hear you.
Oh, sure. Let's try this.
Thank you.
Is it any better now?
Sounds pretty clear.
Better now? A little bit better now? You're louder, but I don't know if I am.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
about as loud. That's about as loud as it gets. But
no, it's
cool.
or I can actually be loud. Yeah. So there you have it. Say no less often. FlowBoost is completely headless. What that means is there's not another app that you log into. There's not another set of credentials. Everything you do is within Marketo, which is another reason we can say with confidence it's kind of part of Marketo. If Marketo can do it, we mean, well, we can set up a FlowBoost call within Marketo without having to go outside that or having any other place that we're secretly fiddling with stuff. You use Marketo admin UI, you use smart campaigns where everybody knows where to look, and like I said before, you can say we can do it in Marketo. In 2014, this is really just where my background came into Marketo. I'm a techie, a developer, quite obviously, and started by learning Munchkin or reverse engineering how Munchkin works or was failing to work at a client. And that prepared me in a strange way. I thought Marketo could pretty much do anything because, Munchkin's pretty cool. The whole idea of comparing it to Google Analytics and all the other stuff that it lets you do on top of that with, known lead association and so on. And then I was like looking in the UI and learning the UI back then. It's like, wait, there's no flow step that lets me add 2 scores together. There's no flow step that lets me search and replace in a string field or calculate the difference between 2 dates. And that's when the wheel started spinning. And I started going, I bet I could do this with a minimal intrusion into like the Marketo ecosystem, to not have to say to someone, you have to pull stuff out into Excel, massage it, run crazy queries on it, and re-import it to do these kind of relatively minor, though often business critical field modifications. Then of course the score stuff is integral to the job that we do. And I was really kind of startled that people had all these kind of hacks with synchronizing when you do a score increment, and then you can falsify, like, I don't want to say falsely, but you can simulate the total score concept, right? So this is kind of the birth of FlowBoost, was just my amazement that Marketo, for all of its awesomeness in other ways, was missing stuff like this. And as you may also know that I'm a velocity person. I love velocity, but the fact that I can do infinite things in velocity, but I can't write them back to fields means, of course, it's just becomes a source of frustration. The idea behind FlowBoost is that it's for automatic and immediate changes. It's not built for like periodic, once per week, or monthly synchronizations or things like that. And specifically, as I just mentioned, it's not, it's meant to get you over the hurdle of, okay, I need to fix these 500,000 leads that have some mangled weird character in their last name or things like that. So I'm quote just, right? I'm going to pull it out into Excel, search and replace, and re-import. I don't consider that to be immediate enough for me. I want to be able to go in, run, in this case, request a campaign to do that kind of fix up. So you can use Flow Boost in a triggered fashion, or you can use, or like a pure trigger fashion, or you can run a batch that then runs request campaign to run a Flow Boost call Flow Boost for each lead in a big batch. But again, I don't consider it periodic. It's always on, always waiting. It's also under your control, right? So maybe you have a great data science person or just a SQL person, frankly, and late at night, you need them and they're not there, but Flow Boost is. I just kind of made that up. That sounded like I rehearsed that. So here are 5 starter ideas that we're going to go into. And this is where I screw up the Alt tab part, looking in Marketo at things you can do with Flow Boost. Number 1, adding score fields and changing, measuring the changes to a score field over time. We might not get to that second part today, but that's another thing you can do. But the adding is so critical. Manipulating string fields, multi-valued fields, searching, replacing, capitalizing, uncapitalizing, all that kind of stuff. Capping program members is another thing that I was really kind of amazed didn't exist in Marketo when I started working with the platform in 2014. And so that was maybe one of the 2 kernel things to start Flow Boost were adding scores together and capping program members. Even before search and replace, I was like, how can I not limit the number of people in a program? For most people, that means, capping webinar registrants. It doesn't necessarily mean members of a program, but technically you could do it with anything. So Flow Boost has a built-in module called FB Counter that allows you to count the number of things. The things can be anything you want, but 99 of the 100 people who are using it to cap the number of program members. Number 4, another, what the heck, I can't do it in Marketo, only sending an alert if it's during business hours for your company. It's literally impossible to do without the hackiest, craziest thing that I almost blogged about the other day, but I realized it's so complex, I don't know if I could even tell people to do it. So why not just use Flow Boost to do that? And saving money by offboarding leads is we'll look at, and by offboarding, I mean, instead of deleting and purging someone completely from the system, let's say they're dormant and Marketo is knocking on your door and saying you owe us another $100,000, whatever, for your lead count. You can use Flow Boost to take a subset of interesting fields for people, store them offline. It's basically like temporary storage, and then pull that stuff back in if the people are resuscitated, they re-enter the system via form fill and so on. So those are just 5. And by the way, almost anything you want, you can do. I'm not touching the other things you could do, as V mentioned, with REST API stuff. We're not going to look at anything that relates to calling the Marketo REST API, just stuff that's more outbound from Marketo, if you will. So managing scores, and here's my first Alt tab. We don't need to sync change scores anymore. We can also use uniqueness, and we can say, and I'm not sure if you've ever thought about this, you can't actually say, has the person visited 5 unique web pages in a day in Marketo, because Marketo doesn't tell the difference between 5 unique web pages and 5 web pages. But with Flow Boost help and the counter module, you could do that. Something tells me I'm not going to get through all of these demos live, but that's the problem. Okay, so here we are looking at a live sandbox instance. You can see I have some lab smart campaigns set up here. I've just used folders and in some cases folder tokens. You don't need a program. Of course, you all know how to run smart campaigns. The one where I have a program is a registration cap one. And we're definitely getting to that. So here's like the add scores campaign. A simple campaign is requested, triggers it, and the flow calls a webhook called Flow Boost Demo add scores. We'll look at what that webhook actually looks like and how we set that up, but every Flow Boost call is under the hood a webhook call. But the service and the remote receiver of that call and everything you want that call to do is all programmed or entered, to not be scary and use the word programmed, entered within the Marketo UI. You don't need an external person to be authoring your webhook compatible service or to write code for you. You are pasting that stuff in. And again, it's that sense of you're in control. There's no other admin of FlowBoost. You are the admin of Marketo, so you're the admin of FlowBoost. So this simple add scores can be demonstrated. Let's see if I have my scores set up right on my test lead here. This is going to add up the behavioral score and the demographic score and the, what's the other one? Oh, the influence score is actually an SFDC custom field. I knew I'd forget that. The influence score. We're going to add those up and we're going to write that back to the main person score field. Typical task, right? Blunt edged, adding scores together. So all I need to do that is go in here, request that campaign, find my requestable campaign, add scores. Run that now. Watching the activity log. You'll see that I set up these test leads a while ago. Watch that happen. And you'll see that the person score was changed to 74, which is indeed the sum of 19 and 20 and the other one, right? The demo score. Yeah. So that's bare bones, simplest way to accomplish something that it's impossible to do within a simple Marketo flow step. But with FlowBoost, you're automatically, leveling up your ability to work with scores. You can do a lot more with scores. There's another pre-configured FlowBoost webhook that I have in here that lets you choose the max score and write the max score back to a field called highest score. As simple as running that requested campaign, getting the max score, and that's going to set this field called highest score to the highest of the three. So it's again using an influence score and behavioral and demo and calculating them. Wait. Such is the problem with any live Marketo demo, right? It's the when will it queue it? Do it. And then I end up refreshing, and maybe we'll look at that in a moment. How about if I just, yep, there we go. Finally queued it up. The highest score field has been changed to 35, which is indeed the highest of those three, 19, and I think like 20 and 35. So you could use that and all manner of other matrix scoring and everything else. This is just an example. It's not just about adding scores. It's about doing anything you want with scores, quite frankly, because they're just fields. You're passing fields to this powerful kind of mangling, calculating, as we say on the marketing site, do anything service. So that's demos 1 and 2. Option 2, searching and replacing in strings. This is, again, I know I keep saying this, but I'm just amazed you can't do it in Marketo. Marketo is, of course, case insensitive when you do a search in the smart list, match for contains or starts with and so on. But what if you actually want to work with case? What if you want to capitalize? What if you want to clip something out of a string field or add something on without overwriting the whole thing and things like that? Again, very simple to do with a FlowBoost webhook. One thing we do, I mentioned in my third point here, we detect interesting changes in fields, which means, let's say we have a multi-valued field. You might not have ever thought about this. In a multi-valued field that gets tied to a set of checkboxes or a multi-select checkbox, multi-select input. The order of the values or sub-values within a multi-valued field really doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if it says apples, oranges, pears, or apples, pears, oranges. So you don't want to trigger necessarily a change data value if the material change is meaningless. Like that's, you don't want to send alerts because somebody's product interests changed from, speakers, comma, TVs to TVs, comma, speakers, right? Same practical value. That's another kind of munching and decision you can make with FlowBoost. So, and you can parse domains out, split, and so on. I was going to just show a quick example here of a search replace setup that I have. This one uses my tokens, which is kind of cool, I think. They're folder level my tokens. In this case, not just used for inheritance, but because the smart campaigns are right inside the folder, which you can do with a smart campaign, you're able to do this. So I have a few different examples. Here's one where I can search for the string apple and replace it with the string orange. There's another where I can do a wildcard search pattern, or what we call a regular expression, to search for a given pattern and replace it. In this case, the search would be for like app, anything that starts with app, and ends with any character, and replace that with delicious hyphen whatever that is. So you can enrich and manipulate the sort of a semantic meaning inside a string field, which Marketo itself doesn't really have any awareness of. It's kind of weird, in fact, that Marketo doesn't even know how to parse a semicolon delimited field on its own. That's why you end up with those contains constraints that are actually kind of fragile when you're looking at a multi-valued field. And then I also have this other example of how I could pluck a value like snow peas. I use these fruits and vegetable examples, but like if I had a list, multi-valued field, apples, semicolon, snow pea, semicolon, oranges, I could use FlowBoost to take just the snow pea out. And that's really important for getting your data right. If there's a data problem and you end up with an extra unwanted sub value, like think about subscriptions, newsletters, and things like that, where you manage them in a multi-valued field. If there's an extra unwanted sub value in a batch of 40,000 people, and it can be in any position within the string, it's an utter nightmare in my experience. But with FlowBoost, you can go in and say, you know what, we accidentally assigned that newsletter or that product interest or whatever. We're just going to pluck that out. We're going to take that out and replace it with just the original value. That is, or I should say the shrunken value. That's as easy as going in here. Let's see. I find I always forget that it's a custom field. Sorry about that. The product interest field. So let's see which of these we want to do. How about we do the plucking out a snow pea one, because that's kind of the most advanced one. So I said snow pea, orange, grapefruit. Did say snow pea, not snow peas, right? Yep. Okay. Cool. I'll go in here. Let's refresh this, and you can see that change committed, right? You can see that the product interest changed. Let's run that campaign. That's the one pluck value. And let's watch that go. Now, as I mentioned, you could do this on a kind of traditional trigger basis based on a changed data value or other kind of one-by-one triggers, or you can set up a batch to run request campaign and run FlowBoost. Since to preempt this question that someone may have, like the practical volume for a day, we have people running FlowBoost over like databases of 100,000 people every day. I'm not sure that I would really say that that's the greatest idea, and maybe there is a sort of point where you go, you know what, maybe this should be pulled out. We have 2 million people. Let's pull it out. In this case, let's do it with SQL and re-import it. But these are for these, critical spot changes, and even bigger ones, 20,000, 40,000, 50,000 people, no problem at all. And let's see here.
So I'm just going to break. So I'm just going to break in for a second, Sandy. We're not going to stop because it's too good of an opportunity that we have you on the phone. We do realize that we're coming close to time and that some people may need to leave. Just drop away if you need to. We are recording the session, so if you want to come back, but everyone who wants to hang out, please do so.
Thank you. So here we go. Exactly as predicted. We changed the product interest field from apples, snow pea, orange, grapefruit back to apples, orange, grapefruit in place within Marketo without configuring anything outside of these search and replace patterns. You could set up any, folders, campaigns, and anything you wanted. Now, perhaps the moment that everybody is, well, some people are curious about, the wonderful registration cap concept. FlowBoost has, as I mentioned, a module called FB Counter. And when I say module, I mean it's like an internal part of FlowBoost. FB Counter has two prime elements. One is the server side, where you increment a counter, as we'll do here when somebody registers for a program. And then there's the public side, which is what you can use in a web page like this one right here, a standard registration page, very simple form. You can see on this form, I am displaying the current registrant count of our test program, which I'm fetching in real time from FlowBoost as the landing page is drawn for people. So it's checking and getting the most up-to-date number. And in our program itself, we have this smart campaign that's nothing more than checking to see if they filled out the form, and then running the increment program counter FlowBoost webhook. When we do that, and again, this is just a local form, very simple, nothing else to see that. When we run this increment, it's going to bump up the counter, and the counter is dedicated to each program identified by its program ID. So you can have an infinite, unlimited number of counters. Every program can have its own. In fact, anything can have its own. A counter, I've tried to explain to people before, it's like a counter doesn't really have any inherent meaning. It's just a bunch of stuff you count, but the name of the counter matters. So in this case, we name the counter with the program ID in it. So this is like, what is this program 32 something? Yeah, 3287. It's like the counter name is the program ID 3287, like webinar 3287, but it can be anything. So what happens here, if I fill this out, quick registration, and let's see what happens on this side. That looks like the earlier one, right? We're still waiting for this one to come in. It's 6:49 p.m. Yeah, that was the earlier one. Hold on, we'll see when that gets processed. Whoa, what are you doing? Why aren't you processing? It never knows when you're on a demo, right? Or it always knows, and it messes you up. Let's check the webinar registration, see the person is in there. Yep, that's test reg 02. That person just got in. Sometimes actually the results tab doesn't update immediately. I just remembered that. So you know what? Let's assume that the results tab is just kind of lagging behind. No. Oh no, I am undone by it not running yet. Where is it going so well? Well,
the magic of live demos.
Yeah, well, what is Marketo doing, like a trigger backlog thing again? That's not good. Or am I this stupid that I set the smart campaign to only let someone go through once? Yeah, all right, great. Oh,
even the people who have been using Marketo for a billion years make that one.
Well, this is
you're making everybody else feel better right now.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is, it's technically not a mistake. It's only a mistake because I was rehearsing this before the call. So, well, I'll get into that another time if we have time. But like, actually, for a registration call like this, I would want the person to only be able to run through once, so they only get counted once.
Yep.
Right. So that was deliberate, but I forgot to undo and create a new program. Well, anyway, my bad. So how about good old? Oh wait, no, that one's probably in there already too. Okay. I know I can start with 10. Sorry, I've run some test people through before. Okay, now let's check to see results here. Well, I'm glad. It's always good to know that Marketo is behaving appropriately, right? Okay, there's test reg 03, and now you can see the current. I ran 2 through, right? I ran reg 03 and reg 10 through. So now the current registrant count is 3. If I go through again, I'm going to do my 11th person. Now I have this set to be a cap of 3. So I'll show you where that cap is set up. Let's see if that one, there's 11. and you notice that now it says the current registrant count is 4, you will be waitlisted. So it immediately knows how many people have passed through, and you can do anything you want on your Marketo LP. You could hide the form, you could redirect the person to, you know, a waitlisted LP where it says like you can't register. But here I've taken like the lightest weight approach that is just like, we're over limit, our limit was 3, but we're still gonna let you register. We're gonna warn you that you'll be waitlisted. You can make all kinds of dynamic changes, do some cool stuff with the landing page. But the key is that this page is in real time fetching the count, and the count is updated for every registration, every person that passes through this smart campaign. Key, pretty cool stuff, I think.
So I know
have-
that we've got a
yeah, yeah.
backlog of questions
Yeah,
all
I
going
haven't
on.
even checked. Well, maybe I can.
No, these guys
pick up
are
from
these
here
guys
another
have been
day.
keeping it. These guys have been
Okay.
keeping track of it. So there's a bunch of really
Okay.
cool questions. So we
Well,
might start throwing those at you.
Yeah. Sure. Why not? Let's do questions now, and I'll try. Let's see what we got.
Thanks, Method. I'm going to read out all the online questions. We've got about 5 at the moment.
Okay.
Next question is, are there any security or privacy considerations for FlowBoost, and would GDPR be impacted if we use it?
FlowBoost doesn't store anything that you don't specifically instruct it to. So sometimes people do say, like, I don't want to pass my email address, even though it's destroyed immediately after it's processed. Like you don't, or in fact, I take that back. You're not even passing an email address in this case. Scratch that. For counters, for example, you're not passing anything that's PII. You're just saying, please bump this, this counter up. So nothing is being sent over the wire in any way. The only case where something is being sent over the wire would be like if you're sending the email address and you want to strip it, down to the domain or manipulate it, then technically you're kind of bouncing that email address off the processing server. It is immediately destroyed. All actions in FlowBoost are done only in memory, and the whole thing is torn down immediately when the call is done. So there's no persistent storage, to answer that question in a longer way. But there might be some people who are concerned about sending email addresses, but I can't see anybody worrying about sending like someone's product interest field, and managing it and sending it back again. Depends, I guess, is the answer.
Thank you. Next one is, are there any plans to update FlowBoost to use the flow step service, self-service flow actions in place of webhooks?
No, because I don't really like the way that API was built out primarily. It's possible, but you're not really gaining anything. For the vast majority of FlowBoost use cases, you wouldn't gain anything with a self-service flow step, because if you're passing your web registrants through FlowBoost, or you're, like I'm showing here, sending alerts during business hours, that's going to be less efficient to do with an SSFS, right? Because it's asynchronous. The self-service flow step, if people don't know, it's like kind of like a webhook that you send and then wait for a reply. Now, of course, that reply could be a second later, but with FlowBoost, you're guaranteed that the reply is immediate when you send it. That said, SSFS is better for, oh, I have another reason. SSFS is better for like giant batches, but I forgot this. SSFS doesn't support the kind of payload that FlowBoost does. It's not as flexible, in fact, as the webhook feature is. The Marketo webhooks are much cooler than I think people realize they are. But yeah, SSFS is locked down to only JSON payload. So it couldn't do anything like this, because you can't say, please calculate this thing. You're only sending it data. So it wouldn't make any sense to use SSFS for that.
Thank you. The next question, can you use FlowBoost to check if an updated email synced from Salesforce is new or the same email with lower or uppercase variations?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Can you use
if an email address is new, like in other words, instead of synchronizing the instead of syncing the person over to Salesforce, see if a person with that email address already exists in SFDC?
I'm going to ask Maria, who asked the question, to clarify if she can. If she's still here.
Maybe not.
She might have dropped off, so I'm not sure.
You actually, with the FlowBoost Standard Edition, and Joe Pitts and I were in fact working on something with this very recently, you can call directly into Salesforce, and in a sense, hop the line. One thing we do with that is like checking the owner of people in Salesforce directly, or changing owners directly in Salesforce, even if the person, like, we can't do that kind of logic within Marketo itself. We can do that. So similarly, you can check in Salesforce, if you have Salesforce credentials, of course, you can use FlowBoost to check all kinds of things and pre-check before an SFTC sync. So my answer to that is yes, though I'm not entirely sure about the use case, but yeah, there's no problem with checking SFTC. It's just a API call. Yeah.
I think someone just added a note. It is the same email in the same email field, but I'm not sure.
So if Marketo registers that the value of the email address has changed, can you actually tell if it's the email address has actually changed, or if the case has just changed?
Yes, you could. You could call you could use FlowBoost to immediately call the get multiple leads by filter type API endpoint, and get back the list of matching email addresses, and then find out what their email addresses really are. That is to say, like, what their capitalization really is, and determine whether it's a true new person. You absolutely could do that. That's a good question. That's actually a great example. But I was saying, like, Marketo is case insensitive to a fault. It almost hurts us because we can't tell if things are changing. You can absolutely do that.
I believe the use case here is that classic Smart campaign where you are checking to see if the email address is invalid. It's changed, so we're just going to change it to valid again. But someone's just updated the capitalization. They haven't actually changed the email address.
That is a great example. Actually, I should write a blog post about that, because it's it's the same person. Yeah, you'd have to, well, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, because trying not to be technical, right? But
we'll just say yes.
Get the person, get the person's ID, get the change data value activity from the API, and then check the new and old. Yeah, the other way to do it, though, it's probably easier, is to have a proxy field where you always copy the last one, the most recent one, you write it to a secondary email address field, and then you can compare the two much more easily using FlowBoost. You still can't do it using Marketo, but using Marketo alone, but you could definitely still do that. That's kind of a pattern that I like, is interesting fields are always proxied to another field. So every time they change, the previous value is written to another field. Then you've got two fields, and it's like instant, very easy comparison to do with FlowBoost on a case sensitivity basis.
Thanks for the more. Is FlowBoost available for other marketing automation platforms, or only Marketo? Given it's headless, theoretically, it could plug into anything, right?
Yeah, in theory, it could. I have a client that's using it from Java. They're assembling they have their internal integration platform, and they assemble a Java payload, totally outside of Marketo, and they send it to FlowBoost. So yeah. If it basically any system that can create a matching payload can use it.
Could you split or copy a multi-value field and put it into another field?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's the splitting is how the demo of like taking out snow peas, the splitting is already something we've done there. And we could also, instead of just plucking it out, or maybe a better use of the word pluck, I could have plucked that out and returned it in another field. I could split a multi-valued field into, unlimited other fields.
And we've got one more question from Vidhi in the room here.
Hi, Sanford. Actually,
hello.
On your program on the webinar setup, so we are using Zoom platform, which is like from Launchpoint integration. We don't need to write any webhook code anymore. So I'm just thinking, if we use FlowBoost as well, how will FlowBoost talk to the Zoom or any event platform?
Well, I wouldn't call FlowBoost a substitute for the Zoom integration. In this case, when we're looking at the registration cap, it's independent of what you could be using On24 or BrightTalk or Zoom. It wouldn't really matter. But FlowBoost doesn't talk directly to your webinar provider. It could, I guess, you could build that out if you're good at stuff like that. But I wouldn't think it would really be helpful, frankly. It's more a complement to the Zoom integration.
Thank you.
I think I've got everyone's. Yell out. I missed you.
Any other questions from any of the other viewing parties, or have we missed anything online? Seems like we're good so far. Should we continue. We are about 10 minutes over, but Sanford, if you're still happy to continue with your demo.
Is there something you wanted to show?
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll just run through very quickly as my dining companion is going to ready the scythe. Although it's my birthday, so I shouldn't be beheaded on my birthday. That wouldn't be good. I will do the business hours check very quickly. So the idea here is that you set up your business hours. In this case, we're going to say 9 to 5 Australia, Sydney time zone. We actually set the time zone up. Key part. We set the time zone up in a token, so we could change that. I was testing it with America/New York. Here we do Australia, Sydney. And what this allows us to do is only send alert if it's during business hours. So we know it is during business hours right now. So pretty easy check is just grab any of our test leads. And we're going to do, is it during business hours? Now, the business hours, while that runs, if we look at the smart list, it's just checking, and then it runs the FlowBoost business hours checker, and then we have the alert is a separate campaign. The alert is contingent on the response from FlowBoost. So the alert is right here. We trigger on webhook is called. If the webhook is called and the response, specifically we're constraining it here, if the response contains biz hours true, which is infinitely configurable, you can give it any name you want, but I just set all those hooks up before. Then, and I didn't want to send an alert because that's kind of boring on a demo, I just set an interesting moment called simulate alert, where it said would send the alert here. In fact, by now, perhaps we can even look at that result. Hey, there it is, 8:44, interesting moment, would send the alert here. And that's because it is during business hours. And you could have another, let's say, a companion smart campaign that said response contains biz hours false, right? And in that case, you could send the person to a queue, or send maybe it's not an alert, but it adds them to a list or adds them to a campaign, or whatever else you want to do. So you can split. This allows you to split a given event into, is it an interesting time, or is it a good time, or is it a bad time? Again, totally crazy that Marketo can't do that in a smart list, but hey, you can. And I won't have time to do the offboarding thing because I have to jump, and I went over time. But I should probably finish this. Maybe I should run this whole thing through and record it, and then you guys can watch that too. But anyway, thank you, everyone. Thanks again to Jay for the invite. I'm going to quickly go through. I have 5 more ideas. These are going to be even super cool. You can see those even more. These were not going to be demoed. These are just like food for thought. You can go to flowboo.st, and I'll send you a community key. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks so much, Sanford, and happy birthday again.
Thanks.
That was really, really awesome to watch. Thank you, everybody. If you for those who participated in the chat, asking the questions, if you want a gift card, we'll let you know. I just want to say thank you to our speakers, to Sanford, Vivek, and V, and to all our mug leaders for organizing this. Special thank you to V for helping to organize as well, and to our sponsors, Adobe and Grant Thornton, and to you guys, the participants and practitioners. Thank you all for coming today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.